Textbooks that cost students hundreds of dollars each term could be duplicated at near zero marginal cost once written, yet the price stays high because of how courses are chosen and paid for. This is First Principles Daily, episode 66. A single required textbook bundle for an undergraduate course often runs between $150 and $300. Sometimes the total climbs higher when the bundle includes access codes that lock the material to one term. Once the words exist, sending another copy to a student costs essentially nothing beyond server space or a few cents of ink and paper. The difference between those two numbers is not explained by the physical materials inside the book. It comes from a set of institutional habits that treat a repeatable good like a custom-built machine each time. The gap becomes visible the moment a department keeps the same core text across multiple terms, yet the per-student charge does not drop after the first cohort has paid for the initial authoring and review. Publishers still follow a model built around physical printing runs and annual revision cycles. A new edition appears every 2 or 3 years, often with only modest changes to problem sets or examples. Those modest changes render the previous edition obsolete for many assignments. Professors select the text, yet the cost falls on students who have no direct voice in the choice. This separation removes the usual market pressure that would otherwise reward lower prices. Access codes add another layer because they convert a durable object into a time-limited license that expires at the end of the term. The license blocks resale and forces each new student to start fresh. Campus bookstores and third-party platforms capture margins on both new and used copies, but the underlying list price remains anchored by the publisher's list. Faculty often default to the same publisher they used in graduate school or the one whose representative visited most recently. Evaluating alternatives requires time that is not compensated, so the familiar choice wins. Departments rarely maintain a central fund to buy perpetual licenses or to commission replacements. The result is a market in which the buyer and the payer are different people. New editions arrive on a predictable schedule, and the marginal cost of distribution has fallen while the price has not. These patterns feel normal inside the industry because every participant optimized for their own constraints rather than for the lowest sustainable cost of delivering the content. When a professor considers switching, the immediate personal cost is the hours needed to rewrite lecture notes and realign homework. The savings accrue to students who are not in the room during the decision. Over time, this produces a stable equilibrium in which list prices stay elevated even as digital delivery removes most printing and shipping expenses. The same equilibrium explains why used book markets shrink each time an access code is required. The code itself is priced to cover the full list amount rather than the near zero cost of regenerating a new key on a server. If the words and diagrams already exist, the raw cost of delivering them is the price of storing a few megabytes and transmitting them once. That figure sits close to zero for digital distribution and only a few dollars even for a printed copy on commodity paper. A typical new textbook sells for roughly $200. Dividing the finished price by the material and distribution floor produces an idiot index in the range of 50 to several hundred, depending on whether the copy is digital or physical. The gap does not sit in the paper or the ink. It accumulates in the repeated authoring and reviewing cycles that produce each new edition. It also accumulates in the sales force that visits departments, in the platform fees for access capital code systems, and in the carrying costs of unsold inventory that must be written down. Marketing budgets sized for a national textbook adoption further widen the spread. The largest single addition comes from the decision to treat each course section as a separate sale rather than as one more instance of a good already paid for. When a department continues using the same text for several years, the per-student cost should fall sharply after the first cohort. Yet the list price rarely reflects that reality. The institutional rules around edition churn and access expiration keep the effective price from tracking the physical or digital floor. Every extra dollar above the cost of storage and transmission is therefore traceable to choices about who pays, how often the content is declared obsolete, and whether the license survives beyond a single term. One can see the arithmetic clearly by imagining a department of 200 students using the same text for 4 years. The first-year cohort pays the full authoring and marketing overhead. Subsequent cohorts should in principle pay only the marginal delivery cost. Yet the published price stays fixed because each new student is still required to purchase a fresh access code. The objection that content must still be created and reviewed is valid, but that cost is incurred once and then spread across thousands of students rather than re-incurred with every new term. An open educational resource funded once by a consortium of universities could remove the recurring authoring cost for core subjects. Faculty would need incentives, such as teaching release time or departmental credit, to adopt and adapt those resources instead of defaulting to the familiar commercial text. Institutions could buy perpetual licenses or underwrite the maintenance of a shared platform. That step would convert a recurring student expense into a one-time capital cost. The first concrete move would be to identify high enrollment courses where existing open texts already cover the required topics at acceptable quality. The second would be to create a small fund that compensates faculty for the work of aligning those texts with local learning objectives and updating problem sets. The third would be to negotiate with accreditation bodies so that departments receive credit for measured learning outcomes rather than for the brand of the textbook they assign. Hard limits remain because original authorship and peer review still require compensated time. Some advanced or rapidly changing fields may need frequent updates that cannot be supplied entirely by volunteers. Quality control and version management also demand ongoing labor that cannot be wished away. Still, the arithmetic shows that once the initial investment is made, the marginal cost per additional student drops close to the cost of bandwidth, not the cost of a new printing and distribution cycle. A department that spends $50,000 once to adapt and maintain an open text for a course serving 800 students per year would, after 3 years, have spent less per student than the cumulative list price payments under the current model. The remaining obstacles are therefore not technical, but organizational. They concern who writes the check for the initial adaptation, who receives credit for the labor, and how the institution measures success when the metric shifts from textbook brand to measured student cost. When the person choosing a product never sees its price tag, the price can remain far above the cost of simply repeating what already exists. When a good can be copied at negligible cost, any price that stays high year after year is being held there by rules about ownership, revision cycles, and who bears the expense rather than by any physical constraint. Tomorrow, the show returns with another concrete case or another domain where the same gap between finished price and raw material floor is waiting to be examined. The first signal that change is underway will be a department publishing its own measured cost per student for a course that previously relied on commercial bundles. That's a wrap on today's First Principles Breakdown. The ideas travel further when you pass them on. Send this to a fellow builder. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nerra Network. Links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the Nerra Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. Tesla Shorts Time, your daily deep dive into everything Tesla. Find every show free at nerranetwork.com. The age of AI puts real builders on the phone with an AI host. Apply at nerranetwork.com, Age of AI Apply. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.